Continuing coverage coming up at the bottom of the hour. Bulletins at 1. News Radio, WTAM 1100.
I'm Rick Gilmour. Just here for an hour. Because at midnight, we're going to air A Beatle Remembered, the life of George Harrison. Should be interesting. I mentioned to someone, I says, how come no one has mentioned the whole George Harrison, the My Sweet Lord, He's So Fine plagiarism suit? And somebody in the complex said, because he just died? And why would you want to drag him through the mud? And I said, I'm not dragging him through the mud. I thought it was an interesting piece of history. 578-1100 and the 216 area code is the phone number here. It's interesting the different takes that people have on the Beatles. My wife pretty much hates the Beatles. And maybe it's her age group, because she's 24. And I liked the Beatles, but I got a little tired of the Beatles when there would be stations. Do you recall at all when stations would change formats? And I remember one on the FM dial that we do not own that played 24 hours or a whole weekend of the Beatles constantly. And I think I look back on them with fond memories. And I remember my mother telling me when I was a little kid, being on a bus going downtown and running up and down the aisle and singing, I Want to Hold Your Hand. But the whole Beatles thing at some point in my life, I remember them, and I was born in 61, but by 72, 3, 4, I was listening to MMS, WMMS, when it was 101 instead of 100.7, and listening to Stones music. And I thought the Stones were kind of like the anti-Beatles. Rob, by the way, stay out of the studio. I had a deviled ham sandwich for lunch, and I've been dropping wolf bait all day. And I was listening to the Stones. I was listening to the Stones and Zeppelin and Aerosmith and Ted Nugent and then later punk rock stuff. And I don't know, I guess maybe I got a little burned out on it. But I suppose I was speaking with a friend of mine who's, I guess, 53. And he says, geez, Rick, can you imagine how many people would call your radio station if you just went on the air and said, where were you when you heard your first Beatles song? Well, I don't know where I was when I heard it. I don't even know where I heard it. I was a little tiny kid. He says he was at Brush High School or something, and he says all the greasers were on one side of the room and all the girls were on the other side of the room, and they played I Want to Hold Your Hand. And he says everybody just sort of looked at each other like, what the hell is this? So I went to Beatles.com, and I found 3 different websites. This was interesting. I just wanted to run through it a little bit here just to take a look and see what they had. And they had 3 different articles from Beatle haters. It said, when I Want to Hold Your Hand reached #1 on the Billboard charts, the Trashmen's Surfin' Bird was just beneath it. After that went down, Ed Big Daddy Roth said, the cars I build always had a big hole in the dash where a radio should have been but never was. There was another significant event that week, Jack Ruby's Dallas, Texas murder trial. It says, in the months following JFK's assassination, America underwent a national process of disassociation, burying its head in the bloody Texas sand. Only then, in a state of shock, did the Beatles' Caucasoid sugar-coated solipsisms make sense. No Oswald, no domestic success for the Fabs. Well, that's interesting. Another part of the article says, all the Beatles' most distinctive moments were hijacked. Day Tripper's guitar lead was copped from VJ bluesman Bobby Parker. I Feel Fine and She's a Woman. Spotlight riffs were heisted from Bakersfield Buckaroo Don Rich and Merle Haggard sideman James Burton. McCartney acknowledged Pet Sounds as sole competition motivation for Sgt. Pepper. Pet Sounds, the Beach Boys. So I found an article about this My Sweet Lord, He's So Fine plagiarism case. The story starts out in 1962. He's So Fine was recorded. It was a big hit in the U.S., hitting the top of the Billboard charts for 5 weeks, moderately successful in England, reaching #12 on the chart on June 1st, 1963. George Harrison acknowledged that he was familiar with He's So Fine. Well, he got together with some friends when he was in his Hare Krishna stage and wrote My Sweet Lord. And somewhere near the end of the article, and it's interesting if you want to go to Abbey Road or whatever that is, .com and pull it up. But it's not interesting enough to read the entire article on the radio. But it is interesting enough to play a portion of He's So Fine by the Chiffons and a portion of My Sweet Lord. And you tell me, and I was just fascinated that I had not heard anybody in the news media bringing up this case at all. Now, when this article was written in 1993, the case had still not been resolved. A judge had finally picked apart the album that My Sweet Lord came from and decided that there was a percentage of money to be distributed throughout different songs on the album, and came up with a value of how much money My Sweet Lord made. It was quite a large number, about $2.1 million. And this thing was in and out of court forever. But the judge, however, said finally that Harrison had unwittingly violated the copyrights of He's So Fine. So let's listen to some of He's So Fine. Can we do that now, Robert? And then I'll say when. I don't think we need to hear the whole song. Maybe I'll get to that portion of the song, take it to the bridge, see how it changed. Because now it goes back to the same way it started out pretty much and just repeats. Okay, so now I suppose for direct comparison, as the judge in the case did, and I'm certain this was probably no big deal to George Harrison. Oops, I dropped my wallet. It had $1 million in it. If it was a couple $1 million, I think he could probably handle it. He lived in a 100-room mansion. Let's listen to some of My Sweet Lord. I think if I were a judge, I'd say that's pretty... have you ever done that? You listen to a song and you say, boy, that song reminds me of another song. Doesn't this song really remind you? Let's hear a little bit more. He's So Fine, just to back to back on this one. Yeah, and one of the callers up there on the big board says, you're kidding, it's not even close. Well, 578-1100, you tell me. Is it close or not? Your triple Doppler 3 forecast from TV3 chief meteorologist Mark Nolan tonight. Around 39 for a low, currently 47 degrees in Cleveland. And speaking of entertainment, have you gone out and gotten your Best of Trevisano CD yet? I got mine. Round 2 available at Medic drugstores. Participating Borders Books in Beechwood, Cuyahoga Falls, Fairlawn, Solon, Strongsville, Westlake at all Arabicas, including the new Cobblestone Square location in Sheffield Village at the Catalano's Stop and Shop in Highland Heights. It's worth the price just to see Kim in a hot tub with the Labatt girls. Ooh, baby. You can also order online at WTAM.com. Makes a great stocking stuffer, so buy it for somebody and say, hey, you, stuff it. Well, that got folks going here. All the lines are lit up here. Hi, Scott, you're on the air.
Yeah, maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear the do-lang, and I sure as hell didn't hear the So Fine part.
Well, they didn't, and it wasn't word for word. There's different words, but didn't you think the music sounds awfully close?
Right. I'll tell you what. You try to find me a song today that doesn't have a rhythm or a chord progression that's almost identical to something that's already been written and published, and I'll give you $100.
Well, we're talking the difference between 1962 and 1971, not the difference between 62-71 and the year 2001.
Yeah, that's a lousy 9 years. Do you know how much music was published between those years?
I know, but I still say it sounds too close to me, Scott. Hi, Anita, you're on the big one.
Hi. Well, you know what? It's only 3 notes that sounds like that. And I agree with Scott. There are a lot of songs that you listen to today and you think, wow, that song's just like such and such, you know?
Well, there's a lot of songs today that actually sample songs.
Yeah, they do.
That have already been recorded because...
The only thing similar in those 2 songs is those 3 notes, the opening notes. And, I was listening to you singing in that song, and I thought, that's ridiculous. You could do that to any song.
Well,
and try and fit one song into another song.
Let's put it this way, Anita. He was found guilty of plagiarism.
And I think it's only from those 3 notes. Come on.
Okay, but those 3 notes sound pretty close.
Okay, let me bring up another point here.
Yes.
As far as the music was back then, I think like John Lennon said, you had to be there. I was 18 when the Beatles came. You were what, 2, 3?
Yes.
Well, there you go right there, because you had to be there. Times were so different then. The music was different then. It was progressing from one style of music to a whole entirely different type of music that changed the world, literally.
And I will give you that, and I'm not bad-mouthing the Beatles. I'm just saying that there are some people out there who, believe it or not, don't like the Beatles. Is that hard to fathom?
Yeah. It really is.
Okay.
Just for me. It's just for me. But, I like all types of music. I love all types of music, actually. And I'm pretty open to music. But a lot of times people don't even listen to it because, that's old. I don't like it. But they don't even give it a chance.
Well, a lot of that comes with age, too. There are people that just won't listen to anything.
Exactly. They listen to one style of music, and that's it.
Well, all right. I appreciate your input there. Going to this, the anti-Beatles links. The strongest argument against the Beatles' purported genius lies in their solo work. Think Wings. More revealing are Harrison's My Sweet Lord / He's So Fine plagiarism rap and Lennon's bald rewrite of George Jones' A Picture of Me Without You, which he retitled Imagine. Ringo, he's 16, he's beautiful, and he's all yours. Hi, George, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, I'd like to comment about the Beatles song. I think it does sound like the one that you're comparing it to with right now.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, I think they sound so close that obviously a judge said it sounded a little too close. Now, maybe George Harrison was just dreaming, one night and came up with a song. And, I mean, he wrote quite a few songs, so it wouldn't be beyond belief that he'd forgotten all about the fact that he'd heard the Chiffons' He's So Fine and wrote a song, or maybe he was on drugs, or who knows. Maybe he was...
Just like when you added that dueling part in, it sounds just like it, the rhythm and everything.
Well, perhaps I'll redemonstrate before the end of the hour for the non-believers.
Okay.
All right, George. Yep, there you go. Hi, Mike. You're on the big one.
Hey, Kevin. How you doing?
It's not Kevin. It's Rick Gilmour.
Oh, Rick. My fault.
Well, that's all right. Kevin went home.
All right. I think it's the exact same thing. It's the same melody, the same chords. I don't see how some of these people aren't seeing it.
Oh, I know. And I guess the very idea that I might even question anything during this point in time when people are grieving over George Harrison makes me into some kind of a lunkhead. I'm thinking, no, I mean, this was a portion of history of George Harrison that nobody seemed to touch on too often.
Right.
I mean, it just seemed like it was
totally.
It was forgotten about. It was stuffed under the rug, and I thought, well, I guess it's worthy of mention. I mean, it was something that happened. It was part of his life.
Yeah, I mean, big part, too. I mean, that bring up a good point, and I agree with you.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, have a good one.
All right. If you're on the line, be patient. Do they sound alike or not? They do to me, and I guess they did to a judge.
If you see news happen, call the WTAM News tip line, 216-642-INFO, 216-642-4636. News Radio WTAM 1100. WTAM 1100.
Our cyber vote at WTAM.com. Who was more influential on rock music, the Beatles or Elvis? 65% of you voting say the Beatles. The remainder say Elvis. I would say the Beatles. Because Elvis, his influence was from Delta blues that turned into rock and roll. And I imagine if you wanted to sit down and say how many things did Elvis rip off from other people, probably a lot. I mean, even a bigger argument would be somebody like Pat Boone covering... Yes, Rob? You going to play...
No, just an interesting concept. A caller just called.
Yes.
He couldn't go on. He didn't have time. But he said a good test is to hum He's So Far... Yeah, hum both songs and see if you can tell them apart when you hum them.
Not a lot. Not really. See, so far, it looks like 2 and 2. What do you think, Rob? Yes or no? Sound like the same song? Should I put you down in the yes category?
Yes, they sound alike.
Okay, and I'll put myself down. So now it's 4-2. Let's see what you think. Thor, is that you?
That's me. Is this you, Gilly?
Yep.
They sound identical, but it ain't enough to make me spend good money for a Chiffons on with CD.
Okay, but can I put you down in the yes category?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Keep up the good work.
All right, thanks, Thor. John, do they sound alike?
That wasn't my point. My point was that I think the establishment media is trying to erase from people's memory of John Lennon and George Harrison that they were anti-war and pro-civil liberties. And J. Edgar Hoover was putting them under constant harassment, wiretap threats, deportation for that reason. And now we're in the same situation, I think, with the Ashcroft. And I think the media is trying to make us forget all of this, that we're in the same kind of situation under the guise of national security.
John calls and talks a blue streak sometimes. I'm surprised he didn't somehow segue from George Harrison dying to 4,000 babies being aborted every day or some such unrelated topic. Well, I'll tell you what, more of your phone calls after coverage of what in the world's happening here on Cleveland's only news radio, WTAM 1100.
Coverage on Cleveland's only news radio, WTAM 1100, a service of Clear Channel Worldwide.
Harrison remembered as a man of spirituality. Good evening. I'm Nate Marinchak, and this diocese says he will be in Youngstown next week to personally make his case before a judge on behalf of LTV's workers. Pillis says the plight of LTV's workers is a moral issue.
Certainly there are...
He's so fine. He's so fine.
Rick Gilmour.
Media darlings.
On News Radio WTAM 1100.
I want to remind you to stay tuned after the top of the hour news. We'll be airing a Beatle Remembered, the life of George Harrison here on The Big One. Well, taking them votes so far, yes or no. There was a plagiarism suit years ago. Of course, there were many appeals, but George Harrison was found guilty of borrowing from the Chiffons. And so far, 5 of you say yes, 2 say no. Hi, George, you're on The Big One.
Hey, what's up, Gilly?
Hey.
Well, I got 3 things I want to touch on real quick. First of all, the song sounds the same. And, you know, you can take a song and take the melody and change the words, and it's still plagiarism. So the suit was justified. The second thing I wanted to touch on is I'm 1 year younger than your wife, and I have a respect for the Beatles, but I think it's like a lot of groups nowadays. It's like they'll put an album out and they won't follow it with anything substantial. And I think the Beatles, if you look at their career, like the first couple albums were cheesy pop, but I think when they really started experimenting and getting to know what their sound was, they put out some really, really, really good stuff. And you don't really see that too much from any bands nowadays. Like the only band I could say that would be like the Beatles today would maybe be Radiohead. And that first guy that called in, you know, when he challenged you to find a song that doesn't sound like other songs, I mean, he'd be paying me a lot of money because, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. If you look at songs in a specific genre, yeah, they all tend to sound the same. But I mean, if you go to a different genre, it's not going to sound like anything else. And I think if you take like maybe electronic music, you're not really going to find anything that sounds like, because that's something that's developed as music is developed.
Or if you take reggae versus jazz.
Yeah, I mean, all genres are going to sound alike. You're going to hear the same riffs in punk music, and you're going to hear the same riffs in heavy metal or whatnot, so I don't think that's really a fair argument.
A buddy of mine told me, he says, you know, the reason he had a Beatles album is because, he said, what really was their band that they associated with was the Stones. He says, but all the girls liked the Beatles, so back then, if you wanted to get laid, you had to have a Beatles album. He says, but they listened to the Stones. And I thought, well, you know, if you, if you look at the length of the career of the Beatles versus the Stones, I mean, the Stones had a lot of good stuff long after the Beatles were broken up.
Right.
And they got together around the same time.
Well, the Beatles were a lot better when they were together than when they split up anyways. But you don't see the kind of longevity that you saw from some of the bands that came out of the 60s and 70s as you do today. I think a lot of people are just putting out what they're producers and A&R people tell them to put out.
I said to my wife, I said, you got to look at it this way, honey. I said, in historical context, we're still talking about the Beatles, and 20 years from now, people are going to go, Alanis who?
Yeah. Well, I think 20 years from now, people will be talking about Radiohead. I think they're one of the last true rock and roll bands left. If you listen to their first album, you know, it's kind of rough, and it kind of sounds like the alternative that was coming out at the early 90s. But if you listen to any of their later stuff, just the way they progressed and the way they've changed their sound and experimented and you know, added in some electronic music and that to it, I think really there's not too many bands like them around now. I think a lot of the stuff today, no one is going to talk about 20 years from now.
I think that when you look at people that influence music, if you want to look at that, you say, well, what about the Pistols and the Germs and X-Ray Specs and then, you know, later, if you look at later stuff, I mean, there's a lot of people that have influenced music aside from the Beatles. I mean, look at Nirvana.
Yeah, exactly. Nirvana was really important for, you know, the whole shift to alternative rock in the 90s.
If Kurt Cobain could have kept his head on, they might have still been putting out music.
Yeah, and there were a lot of bands, too, that were important in the 80s that no one heard about, like the Pixies and a couple other ones.
Sir, you cannot drop an S-bomb on the program. I understand where you're coming from, George and Canton, but then there again, the mighty S-bomb dropped on the program. Well, I will say that I think that the Beatles probably were an extremely influential band on music. I mean, if you look at the bulk of their work, sometimes it gets better, and like George said, it gets better and better and better as it goes on. I mean, just my opinion, I happen to think that Abbey Road was their best album. And if you can keep putting out that amount of music for that amount of time and still have something to write, there's something to be said for that. That still doesn't mean that I'm not begging the question, do my sweet Lord, he's so fine, sound the same? I happen to think they do. Steve, you're on the air.
Hey, Gilly, this is Steve from Akron. How are you?
Good.
Hey, I had a different take on the comparison of the songs. It seems like we're comparing one song to the other, but if you take the original song and go back a little farther in time and see if it sounded like any other song before it, wouldn't there be a pretty good chance that they may have ripped it off of somebody else?
That the Chiffons got their influence from doo-wop music. It
could be. Or somebody was singing it in a tavern one night and should have recorded it but didn't.
No, that's a possibility. You never know.
Yeah.
Should I put you down in the yes category? They sound alike?
I think they do. But, I think the Chiffons probably, that's the ones that sang the first song.
Yeah.
He's So Fine?
He's So Fine, yeah.
Yeah, I think they may have done a little bit of exploring in their past, too.
Well, that's true. Some people think they invented the word the. Well, here's one that says no. Dave, you're on the air.
Hey, Gilly, how you doing?
All right.
Yeah, I say no. I don't think we can compare the production line Motown music versus some original artists from England there. The Beatles were just something out of this world in the 60s. And
can you hum me He's So Fine?
I don't think I can hum it. I listened to you hum it, and it didn't sound anything like doo-wop, doo-wang.
Well, you can't get the doodle-lang, in there while you're humming.
That's true.
But boy, the melody sure sounds the same to me.
But it's just a totally different music presentation. Like I said, I mean, all those groups coming out of Motown versus original thought processes coming out of other parts of the country and stuff. I just think that...
I'll put you down in the no category.
Okay, I got another question for you.
Yeah.
I got a 66 LTD with a 352 in it.
Yeah.
I got a 3/4 cam in it.
Yeah.
Do you think this 500 CFM Holly I got on it is enough to push that engine?
I think so. It's just 352s are pigs.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you come up with a nice 390 for it?
Okay.
All right?
Thanks, Gilly.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. A 352 was a Ford truck engine that they, for some reason, decided to put in cars. and they're dogs. They're turds. And you know the old saying? And if you're on the line, be patient. I'll get to you. You cannot polish a turd.
Collect.
My sweet Lord. Oh, my Lord. My sweet Lord. Oh, my Lord. Well, I really want to see you. Make you. Yeah.
Rick Gilmour.
You're a big hot stud.
On News Radio WTAM 1100.
Why, thank you very much. Your Channel 3 triple Doppler forecast from meteorologist Mark Nolan tonight. 39 for a low. Tomorrow, cloudy, possible shower, 48. Currently 47 degrees in Cleveland, 47 degrees. And if you're looking for something for Christmas, go out and get the Best of Trevisano CD. Round 2 available at all Medic drugstores, participating Borders Books in Beechwood, Cuyahoga Falls, Fairlawn, Solon, Strongsville, and Westlake at all Arabicas, including the new Cobblestone Square location in Sheffield Village. At the Catalano Stop and Shop in Highland Heights. You can see Kim in a hot tub with the Labatt Blue Girls. In a hot tub. Take it to the bridge. You can also order online at WTAM.com. Makes a great stocking stuffer. Buy one for somebody and then stuff it. Stuff it in their stocking. How's about that? Well, so far, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look up on the big board. Ba-doop. They sound alike. I'm going to add them votes in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 say yes. Those two songs, My Sweet Lord and He's So Fine, that George Harrison was in court for plagiarism years ago, sound alike, just like the judge said. And it dragged out forever and ever and ever because I guess if you're rich and you got good lawyers, you can fight something to the end of the earth. On a better note, and I want to remind you after the top of the hour coverage here on the big one, we will be airing A Beatle Remembered, The Life of George Harrison. It's a ABC News radio special, including a look at Harrison's life from the early days in Liverpool to his days as a member of the most popular band in the world, and life after the Beatles. Should be interesting. I wonder if they'll mention in that hour the plagiarism case and He's So Fine and My Sweet Lord. Maybe yes, maybe no. Well, somebody said, you do this, you're dragging his name through the... I'm not dragging his name through the mud. I happen to think that the Beatles were one of the most influential rock bands of all time. How's that? There, I went on record and said it. What I thought I'd do is close the program with something from Abbey Road that was written, and actually it's called something from Abbey Road. And Frank Sinatra said that he thought that was, at the time, when it came out in 68, 69, and that he said that he thought it was the best love song of the last 50 years. It's a pretty song, and nobody ever accused George of borrowing any parts of other songs for that, so I want to thank you for calling. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank Rob, the man who pushes the strings and pushes the buttons and dials and keeps this program on track. And keep listening right here to the big one. You won't want to miss that special after the top of the hour, so let's take it away with George Harrison's Something.